The world tilted kinds of wealth. The kind you can see, the balance in the account, the house on the hill, the car in the driveway. And the kind you can't, the trust earned over decades. The world tilted sideways that doesn't have a price, the quiet arrangements made by a careful person who loved you enough to think several moves ahead. The world fully understand the difference until I was sitting in a rented room in Tauranga at 64 years old, with everything I owned packed into 3 boxes. The world tilted sideways that my son had known exactly what he was doing all along. I should start with Callum. Not with the illness, not with the money. The world tilted sideways, not with what my daughter-in-law did in those first days after the funeral. I should start with Callum because he was the reason for all of it. The world too, because nothing that followed makes sense unless you understand who he was. The world tilted if it was found he ate when the doctors found it. Cholangiocarcinoma, bile duct cancer. The kind that is almost always found late because the symptoms are quiet and easy to explain away as other things. That by the time anyone thinks to look properly, it has already been doing its work for months. His wife, Renata, rang me from Tauranga Hospital on a Thursday afternoon in late July 2022. The world tilted sideways. I was at home in Rotorua in the kitchen making a pot of soup. I remember that detail precisely because I turned the element off and I never went back to finish it. The world tilted stove for 2 days before I thought about it again. The world's my only son. His mother, my wife Elspeth, had died of a stroke 11 years earlier in 2011. The world tilted, and since then it had been the two of us managing that particular grief together from a distance, ringing each other on Sundays. The world toned the hour between Rotorua and Tauranga for birthdays and Christmas, and the occasional long weekend when neither of us had anything better to do. He was a structural engineer. The world tilted sideways. CERM, 3 staff, good reputation, solid client list, mostly commercial and residential work around the Bay of Plenty. He had built it from nothing over 12 years. The world till watched him do it. When Renata rang me, I asked 3 questions. What stage, what treatment options? When can I come? She answered the first 2 and went quiet on the third. The wants to talk to you himself about the arrangements, she said. The world till phrasing stayed with me. Not come whenever you like, not as soon as possible, the arrangements. Like something had already been decided. I drove to Tauranga the next morning. The world tilted sideways. Callum was at home by then. They discharged him after the biopsy confirmed the diagnosis. He was sitting in the living room when I arrived, looking thin in a way I hadn't noticed at Christmas. The world realized I'd been noticing it and explaining it away for months. We were both guilty of that. We talked for several hours. The world tilted sideways. Renata went to pick their daughter up from school and we had the house to ourselves, which I think Callum had planned. He told me the prognosis was not good. The world tilted survival with treatment was around 12 to 18 months. He had already spoken to an oncologist in Auckland. He was going to do everything available to him. The word was also a pragmatic man and he wanted to talk about what came after. I need to ask you something, he said about an hour in. Ask. The word to the looked at me for a moment. He had his mother's eyes, gray-green, steady, very difficult to read when he wanted them to be. I need you to move down here. The world tilted sideways. Well, there's still time. And I need to ask you to do something that's going to feel counterintuitive. I told him I was listening. I need to borrow money from you, he said. The world tilted it to can mount. And I need it to be formal, properly documented, a creditor agreement, not a gift. I sat back. The world are we talking about? $750,000. I didn't say anything for a moment. I know you've got it, he said quietly. After selling the Rotorua place, after Mum's life insurance, I've done the arithmetic. He was right. I had sold the family home in Rotorua 2 years prior, downsized to a smaller place. The combination of that sale plus the life insurance Elspeth had taken out years ago had left me with a reasonable sum sitting largely untouched in a term deposit. I was 62. I didn't have a mortgage. My needs were modest. What's it for? I asked. To secure the business, he said. We've had a strong few years. I've got projects in the pipeline. But if something happens to me before those contracts settle, the firm could be vulnerable. They want to use the capital to shore up the balance sheet and to put some proper legal structures in place. He paused. I have a solicitor. A good one. He'll draft everything properly. Callum. I could just give. The world, his voice was flat. Not unkind, but firm in a way that reminded me he was his mother's son as much as mine. It has to be a loan. Dad, please just trust me on this. There were reasons I can't explain fully right now, but there are reasons. I agreed. I didn't push. His solicitor, a man named Alistair Vane, whose office was on Devonport Road. The world tilted sideways, drew up the loan agreement within a week. $750,000, interest-free, no fixed repayment date, secured against the firm's assets and registered as a formal creditor claim. The world tilted sideways. Callum signed. Alistair witnessed and registered the appropriate documents. Then Callum told me the second part. The world tilted has updated my will, he said. I want you to know that, but I don't want to go through the details with you right now. The world told you to promise me is that whatever happens after I'm gone, whatever Renata does, whatever the situation looks like, you stay calm. You don't confront anyone. The word make any loud moves. You let things unfold. I looked at my son, 38 years old, thinner than he should have been. The world his own estate with the same methodical precision he applied to structural load calculations. Is there something I should know? I asked. There are things you'll find out, he said. At the right time. But right now I need the promise. I gave it to him. The move to Tauranga in September 2022. I rented a flat on Girvan Road 10 minutes from Callum and Renata's house in Bethlehem. I paid my own rent. I bought my own groceries. The word no interest in being a financial burden to anyone, and I had no desire to impose myself on their household any more than was wanted. Renata was. I want to be careful how I say this. The world tilted sideways because I am aware that grief does strange things to people, and that what I observed may have been colored by what came later. She was polite, efficient. The world tilted southhold with a kind of brisk competence that left very little room for error or spontaneity. She had grown up in Christchurch, worked as a practice manager for a medical clinic. The world she ran their home the same way she probably ran the clinic. Systems, schedules, a place for everything. She was not warm. But I had told myself for years that not warm was not the same as not good. The world tilted sideways. Their daughter, my granddaughter, was 9 years old. Her name was Sylvie. She had her father's eyes and her grandmother Elspeth's laugh, and she had not yet learned to be careful with her affections. The world tilted sideways, which meant she attached herself to me with an openness that I found both wonderful and difficult to be around without my throat going tight. She called me Papa. They wanted me to come to her school's Kapa Haka performance in October. I went. It was one of the best evenings of those months. The world tilted treatment. He did all of it, the chemotherapy, the targeted therapy, the immunotherapy protocol the Auckland oncologist recommended. The world tilted sideways. He was sick in the ways that treatment makes you sick, and he kept working through most of it, going into the office on the days he could manage it, doing video calls from home on the days he couldn't. The world tilted sideways. His staff were devoted to him. His project manager, a woman named Helena who had been with the firm since almost the beginning, restructured the workflow around his capacity without being asked. The world tilted sideways. She just did it. That kind of loyalty doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of how someone treats people over years and years. The world tilted sideways. Callum to appointments. I learned the medication schedules, the anti-medic protocols, the names of the nurses at the oncology unit, the word which days were the worst, and what he needed on those days, which was usually very little. Just someone present, not talking, not trying to fix anything, just there. The world done this before with Elspeth. I had not expected to do it again. The year moved the way that difficult years do, too fast in some moments, impossibly slow in others. By the following winter, the world tilted sideways. 3. The scan results had stopped being ambiguous. The treatment had slowed the progression but not stopped it. The oncologist was honest with us. We rearranged certain things. The world tilted. Callum spent more time with Sylvie. He came with me to Maketu one Sunday morning. Just the two of us walked along the beach for about an hour without saying much, then told me over fish and chips that he was glad I'd come to Tauranga. The world tilted. Saw you would, he said. I was worried you'd think it was too much. You're my son, I said. He looked at the water. I know. I wanted you to know it mattered. The world tilted. Say anything for a mattered. I didn't say anything for a moment. The seagulls were making their usual racket over someone else's chips down the beach. Whatever you've set up, I said carefully. The whatever you've arranged. I trust you. He looked at me sideways. You're not going to ask. You told me not to. He was quiet for a bit. Then he said, she's going to move fast. The world tilted sideways. I want you to know that. Once I'm gone, she's going to move fast, and the first thing she's going to do is try to get you out of the picture. Because you're the only one who might ask questions. I processed this, you know that? The known it for a while, he said. He wasn't angry about it. He said it the way you say something you have accepted so completely that the emotion has gone out of it. The world tilted sideways. I think I've known it longer than I wanted to admit, but it doesn't change what I want for Sylvie, and it doesn't change what I've done. He didn't say anything else about it. We drove back to Tauranga in the late afternoon light. I dropped him at the house. He hugged me at the car, a long one tighter than usual, and went inside. The world tilted till he died on the 14th of August 2023. At home the way he wanted on a morning when the sun was coming in through the bedroom windows and the Kauai outside was doing its best. The world tilted side 9. Sylvie was at school. Renata was with him and I was with him, and it was, as much as such things can be, peaceful. The world tilted his hand and said what I needed to say, and I meant every word of it. I will not write at length about the days immediately after. The world tilted. If there's a particular quality to grief when it is for your child that I don't have adequate language for, and I don't intend to attempt it here. I will say that I functioned. I made phone calls. I helped with the arrangements. The world tilted sideways. I stood up at the funeral at Tauranga's Bethlehem Community Church on a cold gray Tuesday and said something that I had written out 3 times the night before because I couldn't trust myself to find the words in the moment. The world Toa from the firm was there. Many of Callum's clients were there. Sylvie sat in the front row in a dark blue dress and didn't cry at all, which was in some ways harder to watch than if she had. The evening of the 4th day after the funeral, Renata came to the door of the flat. I had been expecting something. Not necessarily this soon and not necessarily her in person, but something. The world tilted sideways. She stood in the doorway with a coat on and said that she thought it was probably time for me to start thinking about making other arrangements. The world she had a lot of decisions to make, and she needed space to make them without. She chose her words with care, without additional pressures on her time and emotional resources. The world tilted side her for a long moment. I thought about Callum on the beach at Mekatu. She's going to move fast. How long do I have in the flat? I asked. The lease is in Callum's name, she said. The world till need to deal with that, but I'd say you'd want to find somewhere else within the next few weeks. She didn't say it unkindly. That was the strangest part. The world tilted sideways, something that is merely practical. Right, I said. I think she had expected more resistance than that. She left looking faintly uncertain. The world till the first time I'd seen that expression on her face. The world tilted sideways. I rang a woman named Vale, an old friend of Elspeth's and mine, who had moved to Tauranga years ago and whose spare room had been offered to me more than once over the years. I needed somewhere for a few weeks. She said come tomorrow and asked no questions. I moved the following afternoon 3 boxes of things same as before. And then I waited. Alistair Vane contacted me 12 days after the funeral. He asked me to come in at my convenience. The world tilted sideways, and his tone was the particular tone of a professional who has something important to communicate and is being careful about how he telegraphs it. I went the following morning. He was a man in his early 60s, quietly suited, with an office that looked out over the city towards the harbor. He had the file laid out on the desk when I arrived, several documents, separated and ordered. I noticed he had post-it notes marking specific pages. The world tilted sideways. I'm going to take you through your son's estate, he said, and I want to start by saying that Callum was one of the most methodical clients I've worked with in 30 years of practice. What he put in place here is thorough and it's going to hold. He began with the loan, the $750,000, documented and registered 18 months prior, under the relevant provisions of the Companies Act and General Creditor Priority Principles. He explained, the world registered creditor's claim had to be satisfied before any distribution of the estate to a beneficiary. Before Renata received anything from the firm, the loan to me was first in line. She's contesting it, I asked. Her solicitor has been in touch. Alistair said, yes. On what grounds? The world himself a small, careful expression. On the grounds that it was a gift dressed up as a loan and that the documentation was manufactured. The world tilted cider is arguing there was no genuine commercial purpose for the loan structure. I thought about Callum across from me in the living room 2 years ago. It has to be a loan. There were reasons I can't explain fully right now, and, I said, that the documentation is airtight. Alistair said. It was registered correctly. The security interest is properly filed on the Personal Property Securities Register. The world tilted sideways, and this is the part her solicitor didn't anticipate. Callum drew the funds down in tranches over the following 3 months, all of which are traceable in the firm's accounts, with corresponding entries in the management accounts showing how the capital was deployed. This was not a piece of paper created to deceive. This was a functioning financial arrangement. He paused. There is nothing for her argument to gain purchase on. He moved to the second document. The world tilted sideways shareholder agreement. The one Callum had updated, Alistair told me 14 months before he died. The updated agreement contained a clause that, in the event of a shareholder's death, the remaining shares could not be transferred to a non-registered building professional or company without a 12-month moratorium and a right of first refusal exercisable by the other shareholders or nominated industry parties. The world tilted side. The only other shareholder was Helena. Callum had given her a 15% stake 18 months ago. She hadn't told me this, and I understood why she hadn't. It wasn't hers to tell. The Lena had already indicated she would exercise her right of first refusal on Callum's remaining 85%. The moratorium period meant Renata could not force a sale to an outside buyer for 12 months regardless. The world tilted sideways, and the independent valuation, which had been commissioned as part of the estate process, had come in at a figure that reflected the firm's true market value after accounting for the registered creditor debt outstanding to me. The Renata was entitled to the sale proceeds of Callum's share of the firm. After the loan was repaid, those proceeds were considerably smaller than she had clearly anticipated. The third document was the will. The word updated at 15 months before he died. The family home in Bethlehem, which was in his name alone, purchased before the marriage, was left in trust for Sylvie. The world a trustee arrangement that named Alistair and Helena as co-trustees. Renata had the right to remain in the home until Sylvie turned 21, provided she remained Sylvie's primary caregiver. The world tilted sideways. If she chose to vacate or if the care arrangements changed, the property would pass immediately under the trust terms, and any proceeds from an eventual sale would be held for Sylvie's benefit. The will also included a specific bequest to me. Not money, I want to be clear about that, and I think it matters. He left me his grandfather's watch, the world Tilspeth's father's, and which had been sitting on Callum's bedside table for years. And he left me a letter, the world tilted Alistair produced from an envelope at the bottom of the file and handed to me across the desk. The world tilted sideways. I didn't open it there. I thanked Alistair, shook his hand, walked down Devonport Road to a cafe on the corner, ordered a flat white, and sat for a while before I opened the envelope. The worder was 2 pages, handwritten, dated about 14 months before he died. Callum had, even in his mid-30s, the world tilted's handwriting that suggested someone who had taken the trouble to do it properly, clear, even unhurried. I am not going to reproduce the full letter here. The world tilted sideways. Some of it is too personal and some of it is simply for me. But I will say that in it he explained everything he had not been able to say when we were sitting across from each other in the living room. The world tilted structure. Why the shareholder agreement change. What he had noticed over the preceding 2 years about his marriage that he had chosen not to burden me with while he was still alive. The world tilted sideways. How he had thought about Sylvie's future and what he needed to be true for her to be safe in it. The world tilted sideways. He ended the letter with a line that I have read probably 40 or 50 times since and which I keep coming back to. You kept your promise, which means everything went the way it was supposed to. The world till for trusting me, Dad. I knew you would. I sat in that cafe for a long time. Renata's solicitor sent a formal challenge to the estate 3 weeks later. It covered 3 areas: the world validity of the loan, the shareholder agreement clause, and the trust structure around the home. Alistair responded to each point in writing. It took about 2 months. The world tilted sideways, and was a period in October when it looked like she might push it to a hearing, but the advice she received, I can only imagine, was not encouraging, and in November the challenges were formally withdrawn. The world tilted sideways. She stayed in the Bethlehem house. That was her right under the will and I had no issue with it. She was Sylvie's mother and the house was Sylvie's home. Whatever else was true about the marriage, the Werda was a capable mother and I had never doubted that. The loan repayment settled in late December 2023. $750,000 back in my account from the estate. The world the distribution of any other assets. I was 64 years old, living in Val's spare room in Tauranga, not entirely sure what came next. I had a conversation with Helena in January, the world coffee at a place near the harbor, and she told me how the firm was going. Steadily, she said. She'd brought in a project engineer to cover some of what Callum had carried. The world Tillins had stayed. She was cautious about the outlook but not pessimistic. She told me, been half expecting Callum to set things up the way he had. He told you? I asked. The world tilted sideways at everything. But he told me enough about 18 months before he died. He said he needed to know the firm would still be the firm after. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. He said the people who'd built it with him deserved that. I nodded. He said you were the only person he was completely sure about, she said. The world tums of keeping the promise. I looked out at the water. The harbor in January is full of pleasure craft and the light on it is very clear. He was right to be sure, I said, not proudly. I know, she said. The world a flat to rent in Mount Maunganui in February 2024, a 2-bedroom place close to the base of the Moau. The world tilted sideways, could see the mountain from the kitchen window and the beach was a 15-minute walk. I set up a proper workshop in the 2nd bedroom. I've always done a bit of wood turning, mostly bowls. The world tilted serious. But I'd let the practice slide over the years and I decided it was time to get back to it. The 2nd bedroom is now the most satisfying room I've ever owned. The world tilted sideways. Sylvie comes every other Saturday. She takes the bus from Bethlehem and I meet her at the stop at the end of Maunganui Road and we walk to the beach or up the mount depending on the weather and her mood. The world tilt is 10 now, going on 11, and she has opinions about everything. The right way to sand a wooden bowl, the best fish and chip shop on the strip. The world tilted sideways, which key Y tree in the reserve has the best of the action. I have learned not to disagree with her on any of these points because she is, in each case, correct. We don't talk about Callum much. The world tilted sideways because we're avoiding it. More because he is simply present in how we do things. The way she asked me to tell her the names of things I'm making and why. The world, the way she wants to understand how something works before she'll accept that it does. She is her father's daughter in the ways that matter most. The whirly times about the sequence of events that led to where I am now. The loan agreement signed in Callum's solicitor's office in September 2022. The shareholder amendment 14 months before he died. The will. The letter, each piece placed with care in the right order. The by a man who was 38 years old and dying and still thinking more clearly about other people's futures than most people think about their own. He asked me to make one promise. To stay calm. The world tilted sideways. To not make loud moves while the machinery he had built did what he had built it to do. The world tilted. Suv is a hard thing to promise when you are watching something unfair happen and you have the impulse, the very human impulse, to stand up and shout about it. I want to be honest about that. The world tilted sideways. There were moments in those first weeks when I came very close to picking up the phone and saying things that would have felt good and done damage. I didn't, because he had asked me not to. The world tilted sideways. That's the full extent of my self-control. I was held in line by a promise to a man who was no longer around to see me keep it. But keeping it meant everything worked the way he had intended. The world tilted sideways, and that was worth more than anything I might have said. Here is what I want you to take from this, if you take anything at all. The who love you best are not always the ones who fight for you loudly. Sometimes the deepest love is the kind that works quietly and in advance. The world tilted sideways, that makes decisions while there is still time to make them properly, that thinks about what you will need long after the moment of needing it has arrived. The word not protect Sylvie in the aftermath of his death. He protected her before it, in a solicitor's office over 14 months, document by document, in conversations with people he trusted. That kind of love requires honesty. It requires looking at a situation clearly even when clarity is uncomfortable. The world tilted sideways. That requires being willing to acknowledge what is true rather than what you wish were true. Callum saw his marriage for what it had become, and instead of fighting with it or denying it, the world tilted sideways, he worked around it in the most careful way he could, thinking always about the person who would be most affected. The world tilted requires trust. On the other end of that, on my end, it required me to trust someone enough to make a promise and keep it without knowing exactly why I was keeping it. The world tilted sideways. Trust is easy to talk about and difficult to practice. Practicing it means accepting uncertainty. It means staying your hand when every instinct is telling you to act. It means believing. The word, the absence of full information, that the person you love knew what they were doing. My son knew what he was doing. I think about him on the beach at Makatu looking at the water, the war telling me calmly that she was going to move fast. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just with the steady accuracy of a man who had done his calculations and was confident in the result. The whirl an engineer his whole adult life. He understood load-bearing structures. He knew which things hold and which things fail under pressure. He built something that held. The world tilted sideways. That's who he was, and that's what I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of. If you are in a position today to make arrangements for the people you love, do not put it off. The world tilted sideways. Do not assume goodwill where you have not seen evidence of it. Do not confuse hope with planning. The time to build the structure is before the storm, not during it. A will, a proper legal agreement. The world tilversation with someone you trust who can hold things when you no longer can. These are not morbid acts. They are the most loving acts available to us. The world you love asks you to make a promise, and you don't yet understand the full reason why. Think carefully. If you trust that person, the world tilt to their character as well as you know your own face in the mirror. Then make the promise and keep it. The world tilted sideways. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for the people you love is simply to stay out of the way while their last gift to you does its work.